We covered this news back when it initially came out in January of 2018. But when it came out in January of 2018, I was primarily only Vancouver Canucks based. And my entire fan base was only Vancouver, and we talked about it from the Vancouver point of view, and we explored the possibilities only really from one side. But seeing as this story involves the Montreal Canadiens as well, and in 2020 I do have quite an established Habs fan base, I wanted to revisit this topic because the absurdity of it is just so high, and the alternate realities, the alternate history that we could have seen is so vastly different from what we do have today that I think it's so weird to talk about it. And hey, we talked about this 2 years ago. My sub count has almost tripled since then, so I think it would be appropriate to reintroduce the topic to the audience as well. So, let's talk today about PK Subban and the Vancouver Canucks. Back in the 2016 NHL Entry Draft, the Vancouver Canucks had the 5th overall pick. In reality, the draft went like this. It went number 1 Auston Matthews, number 2 Patrik Laine, number 3 Pierre-Luc Dubois, number 4 Jesse Puljujarvi, and then number 5 Olli Juolevi to the Canucks. Now, on Elliotte Friedman's 31 Thoughts podcast with Jeff Merrick 2 years ago, he told a story that I thought was really interesting, and he confirmed the idea that PK Subban almost became a Canuck on that draft day. How? It involved that 5th overall pick. Story goes, according to Elliotte Friedman, if Pierre-Luc Dubois, the eventual 3rd overall draft pick by the Columbus Blue Jackets, fell down to 5th overall to the Vancouver Canucks spot, then the Vancouver Canucks would have traded the 5th overall pick to Montreal in exchange for PK Subban so that the Canadiens could select Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, why the heck would they want to do that? The guy went 3rd overall. Well, if you take a look at all the mock drafts, HockeyProspect.com had Dubois at number 4, Future Considerations also at 4. ISS had him at 5, McKeen's at number 8. He was the highest ranked North American skater, yes, but that's because all the other guys who were high in the draft were all in Europe. Auston Matthews playing for Zurich in the NLA, Patrik Laine playing for Tappara in the Liga, and Jesse Puljujarvi playing for Karpat in the Liga. So it makes sense. And as well, TSN and Bob McKenzie had Dubois at 5. If you remember the 2016 NHL Entry Draft, you remember Dubois' run with the Screaming Eagles getting really good towards the end. And as a result, his stock rising up and up and up as the draft year went on. Eventually, when draft day came, people saw Dubois as a guy who could become a first-line center, a guy who was playing on the wing in the QMJHL, but who wanted to develop as a center, who could play as a center, and as a guy who he himself said had number 1 potential in the NHL at the C position. So, with that in mind, the idea that he has the potential to become an elite center, and with the idea that the Montreal Canadiens at the time kind of needed a center, it makes sense that they would have wanted to go for what would have been the 2nd best center in the draft behind Auston Matthews, a guy who happens to be from the QMJHL and who happens to be French, right? But the Columbus Blue Jackets took Pierre-Luc Dubois at number 3, spoiling the chances of the Vancouver Canucks being on the board when Dubois would have been available. In fact, it's actually kind of funny. If you scroll through Twitter, you search up Canucks and Dubois, you'll see a whole bunch of tweets of people being frustrated that the Canucks wouldn't have been able to get Dubois. A lot of the Vancouver fan base, I remember at the time, was huge into this guy, myself included. I really wanted this guy, and he was my projected pick at number 5 for the Vancouver Canucks 4 years ago. However, apparently that wouldn't have come to fruition at all, because if he was there, the Canucks would have traded the pick for Subban. Now, we can take this commentary 2 ways. First off, let's take a look at the Montreal Canadiens' point of view, because they eventually did draft a guy in that same top 10 with the name of Mikhail Sergachev. Sergachev was eventually traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning to become Jonathan Drouin. Now, imagine if they, instead of getting Sergachev, traded the 9th overall pick in a package to move up to Vancouver. and get Pierre-Luc Dubois? Well, today, I think the Montreal Canadiens would have their number one center, definitely established. Dubois would be the number one behind Danault, and then you could have Domi or whoever you want as your third line center. Nick Suzuki, I guess. And hey, maybe you change things up. Maybe you play Nick Suzuki on the right wing with Dubois. That would have been crazy. Dubois today is one of the best up-and-coming young centers, and the Columbus Blue Jackets definitely made the right choice of picking him number 3, especially when you consider that Jesse Puljujarvi was the number 3 overall pick in the majority of people's minds, and how he has turned out in the NHL so far. So if the Montreal Canadiens had a Pierre-Luc Dubois today, he would automatically be their number 1 center in the future on a team that has so many really nice winger prospects, guys like Caulfield, guys like Ylonen, guys like Ikonen, and all these other great players they have, and their youth would be looking to dominate the NHL sooner rather than later. A guy like Cole Caulfield is a guy who I don't really see projecting to his NHL max until he's about 25, 26. Pierre-Luc Dubois is really good today already, and he could become even better. Now, of course, in hindsight, you wouldn't have gotten Shea Weber because you would have traded Subban to Vancouver, and you wouldn't have had him to trade to Nashville, but that changes the dynamic of your team incredibly if you swap out a Weber for a Dubois, for example. So, Habs fans, you can comment down in the comments below what you would have thought of this alternate reality where you guys take Pierre-Luc Dubois at Vancouver's number 5 pick, and you don't have Subban, you don't have Weber, but you have a crazy, crazy good first-line center in PLD who is going to be so good for years to come. Now, in the Vancouver side of things, it's actually kind of weird. When I made this video initially 2 years ago, one of the comments that I got that was really prevalent was the idea that the Vancouver Canucks apparently were very high themselves on Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, that to me is not surprising. I remember the entire city of Vancouver pretty much being on the Dubois train. Some were on the Sergachev train, some were on the Tkachuk train, some were on the other trains that were existing, but a lot of Vancouver fans loved Dubois. And to see these tweets over here from Myrtle, where he says that the Canucks likely would have wanted Dubois, or this soundbite from TSN talking about how the Canucks were high on Dubois' versatility, it doesn't really surprise me that the Canucks were involved in Dubois discussions too. Because this guy was good. This guy was really good. It's just interesting to me to take a look at what Elliot Friedman said on 31 Thoughts 2 years later, saying that even though the Canucks apparently liked Dubois a lot, they would have traded it for PK Subban instead. Oh boy, the alternate realities, that does tickle my feathers a little bit. But we talked about this back in the video initially as well. Imagine if the Vancouver Canucks, instead of getting Olli Juolevi, had PK Subban today. Now, this year's PK Subban may not seem like all too much of a great asset, but the PK Subban of 2016-17, of 2017-18, the PK Subban that helped the Predators go to the finals, hey, that's a great looking Subban right there. And there's no doubt in my mind that that kind of Subban would have much more of an impact on the Vancouver Canucks than Olli Juolevi has had so far. And that's no disrespect to Juolevi. I know the guy has gone through a lot of injuries, and I think the guy is still going to become very good. But hey, Subban. PK Subban on the Canucks, eh? That sounds great. At least for the first few years. And I think the pick that the Vancouver Canucks would have had at number 9, because if you trade Subban for number 5, you're not going to stick in the draft with 5 and 9. I think you're most likely going to trade the 9th as well in that package. So if the Vancouver Canucks were able to get the 9th overall pick, who would they have taken then? Guys that were available at that spot included players like Mikhail Sergachev, who's doing really well, Charlie McAvoy, Jacob Chychrun, Dante Fabro. If the Canucks wanted defense, they could have had any of these guys. Yo, what if they took McAvoy? What if the Canucks were able to trade for Subban and get McAvoy with what would have been Montreal's 9th overall pick? Yo, okay, I'm gonna stop right there. We're near the end of the gameplay anyway. Yeah, let's just wrap it up. Oh my goodness, I'm kind of disappointed now thinking of the alternate situations. I hope you enjoyed this video, especially that Trust 99. And Bye.